I got stuck with my ex in a blackout elevator and weakly gave in to cheating with him, while my husband climbed 11 floors to rescue me, only to see me in another man's arms. In the middle of a blackout, I got stuck in an elevator with my ex. It was a divine sign that I had to do it. But in the middle of it all, the light came back on and my husband found me in the worst way possible. The first sound was not a scream, it was an electric hum, followed by a metallic clack. And then the light, a fluorescent, white, and merciless light that flooded the small metal box, erasing the intimate darkness that had enveloped us for the last hour. For an instant I was blinded. My heart, which had been beating with a feverish and clandestine rhythm, stopped dead. I was on the floor of the elevator, with my dress wrinkled, my hair disheveled. Above me, with an expression of absolute panic on his face, was Lucas, my ex. And standing in the doorway of the elevator, now open in the lobby of our building, was my husband, David. He was not alone. Beside him was the concierge with his hand still on the emergency key that had just opened the door. And behind them, a pair of curious neighbors who had come out of their apartments because of the commotion of the blackout. David's face went through a million emotions in 2 seconds. First, the relief of seeing me safe. Then, the confusion upon seeing Lucas, and finally a slow and horrified understanding as he processed the scene. The way we were, my clothes, the guilty panic on my face and on Lucas's. No one said anything. The silence was an explosion. I could feel the stares of the neighbors, the shame of the concierge, but above all I felt the weight of David's broken gaze. I stood up awkwardly, trying to smooth my dress, a futile gesture that only highlighted my guilt. The words crowded in my throat. It is not what it looks like. The oldest and most pathetic lie in the world was struggling to come out, but it was exactly what it looked like. And it was even worse, because it had not been a mistake, it had not been a moment of weakness. For me, in the suffocating darkness of that elevator, it had been destiny. It had been a sign. The universe had locked Lucas and me in, erasing the outside world, telling me that this was what had to happen. Now, under the cruel light of reality, with my husband's eyes on me like 2 knives, that divine sign felt like the cruelest joke the universe had played on me. And as Lucas awkwardly buttoned his shirt and David took a step back, as if he had been physically hit, I knew that my life, as I knew it, had just ended. For you to understand why I'm not the villain here, why I was simply a puppet of destiny, you need to understand the unresolved history I had with Lucas. Lucas was not just an ex, he was the one that could have been. We were together for 5 years, one of those epic college relationships that seem to define the rest of your life. We were fire and gasoline, a mixture of intense passion and dramatic fights. We broke up not for a lack of love, but from exhaustion. We were too young, too volatile. The breakup was a mutual disaster and we both came out with scars. I met David a year later, and he was everything Lucas was not. He was the calm after my storm. He was kind, stable, predictable. He gave me the peace I did not know I needed. I married David because it was the smart decision, the adult decision. And I truly love him. I love the security he gives me, the quiet life we have built. But Lucas was always a ghost in the attic of my mind. A locked door that sometimes, on sleepless nights, I felt the temptation to open. 6 months ago, the ghost became real. I ran into him at the supermarket. It was awkward, electric. We talked for 10 minutes and it was as if no time had passed. He was more mature, calmer. He told me he had moved into a building downtown. I did not think much of it. Then, a month ago, fate took another turn. One of the apartments in our own building, 2 floors above ours, became available for rent and Lucas rented it. I ran into him in the lobby one morning. He told me it was an incredible coincidence. I smiled and agreed, but inside my heart was pounding with a mixture of panic and a strange, forbidden excitement. David, of course, was not happy. He knew the history with Lucas, but what could he do? We could not kick him out of the building. I tried to downplay it. I assured David that it meant nothing, that we were adults, but the encounters became inevitable. In the elevator, in the garage, small conversations, glances that lasted a second too long. The old chemistry, the one I thought was buried, was bubbling beneath the surface. And a part of me, the chaotic part that David had calmed but never extinguished, felt alive again. And then the blackout came. I was coming back from the gym. I got into the elevator, and just as the doors were closing, a hand slipped in and stopped them. It was Lucas. He came in smiling, loaded with grocery bags. We went up in a loaded silence, and then, between the 8th and 9th floor, the elevator shook, stopped, and everything went black. At first there was panic, then a nervous laugh. We were trapped in total darkness. Just the two of us. The alarm button did not work. Our phones had no signal, and it was in that darkness, in that forced isolation, that my impulsive brain started to work. This could not be a coincidence. Running into him at the supermarket, him moving into my building, and now this, locked in together, suspended in time and space. It was not a malfunction, it was a divine intervention. The universe, destiny, or whatever you want to call it, was screaming at me. It was telling me, here is your unfinished business. Here is your chance to close the door or to walk through it. The darkness gave us permission. It erased us from the real world, from our responsibilities, from my marriage. In that metal box, we were just a man and a woman with an unfinished story. And I, who always look for signs, saw this as the clearest one of my life. The first half hour in the elevator was almost unbearably tense. We were sitting on the floor, at opposite ends, our silhouettes barely visible in the gloom filtering through the cracks in the door. We talked about trivial things, the weather, work, but beneath our polite words, an undercurrent of history and possibility vibrated. It was Lucas who broke the ice. He said with a soft voice that seemed to fill the entire space, "This is incredibly strange, is it not?" I told him yes, that it was crazy. He continued, and his voice became more serious. He said that moving into this building had not been a coincidence, that after seeing me at the supermarket, he had not been able to stop thinking about me, that he had deliberately looked for an apartment nearby in the hope of seeing me again. His words were like pouring gasoline on the embers I had been trying to ignore. He told me that he had never stopped loving me, that breaking up had been the biggest mistake of his life, that he respected my marriage, but that he had to know if I felt the same, if I ever thought about what we had lost. And in that darkness, with reality suspended, my answer was brutally honest. I told him yes, that I thought about him, that a part of me would always wonder. And we got closer. The conversation became more intimate, a whisper of confessions in the dark. We talked about our regrets, about our broken dreams. It was as if the blackout had given us a truth serum. All the barriers, all the pretenses vanished. And then, in the midst of that emotional whirlwind, I felt it. The universe was giving me a unique opportunity, a consequence-free opportunity. We were in a bubble, a parenthesis in time. Whatever happened in the elevator would stay in the elevator. It was a judgment-free space, a gift from fate to explore that question of what if. It would not be a real infidelity, because we were not in the real world. We were in a limbo created by the blackout. My chaotic brain did not see the danger. It did not see the betrayal. It saw a cosmic justification. It was I who leaned in first. I kissed him. And it was as if 10 years of history, of repressed passion, exploded between us. It was not a tender kiss, it was desperate, hungry. It was the answer to a question I had been asking myself for years, and one thing led to another. In the darkness, on the floor of that metal box, I let myself be carried away by the sign. My marriage, David, the outside world, everything vanished. Only the moment existed, the justification of fate, the feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be. I did not feel guilty. I felt absolved, as if it were not my decision, but a script I was obligated to follow. The universe had given us this moment, and it would be an insult to fate not to take advantage of it. It was a catharsis, a closure, a final explosion before reality reasserted itself. And then, right at the climax of our bubble of unreality, right at the moment when I was most lost in the justification of fate, the light came back on. The light not only illuminated the elevator car, it illuminated the raw and sordid reality of what I was doing. The bubble of unreality, the justification of destiny, burst in an instant, leaving me naked, exposed, and guilty under the hum of the fluorescent lamp. The image of David, standing in the doorway, his face going from relief to horror, was seared into my brain. It was like watching a glass fall to the floor in slow motion. I knew it was going to break, but I could do nothing to stop it. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Lucas pulled away from me as if I were on fire, buttoning his shirt with trembling hands, avoiding David's gaze. I stood up, trying to fix my clothes. A pathetic act of normality in the midst of a catastrophe. It was David who broke the silence, but not with a shout. His voice was a broken whisper, barely audible. He said to the concierge and the neighbors, who were still standing there dumbfounded, "Thank you. I think you can leave us alone." The people dispersed awkwardly, as if fleeing the scene of an accident. The concierge closed his office door and the three of us were left in the silent lobby. David did not look at me. He looked at Lucas, and with a calm that was 1,000 times more terrifying than anger, he said, "Leave." It was not a request, it was a command. Lucas, pale as a ghost, said nothing. He walked past David and practically ran towards the stairs without looking back. The great love of my life, the man of destiny, abandoned me at the first sign of consequences. And then, finally, David looked at me, and in his eyes there was no anger. There was a void so deep I felt I could fall into it. I tried to speak. I began to stammer the excuse my panicked brain had prepared. "We got stuck, the blackout. We talked." He raised a hand to stop me and said in that same hollow voice, "No, please, do not do it. Do not try to insult my intelligence by adding a bad lie to this." And then I found out. I found out that there was no excuse that could work. There was no narrative, not even that of destiny, that could cover up the ugliness of what he had seen. I turned around and walked into our apartment. He followed me. He walked straight to our bedroom. I followed him, watching him take a suitcase out of the closet. I begged him, I cried. I tried to explain my twisted logic about the signs, about the universe. I told him it had meant nothing, that it had just been a moment of madness, a closure. He stopped with a pile of shirts in his hand and turned to look at me. And this time there was something in his eyes, a cold, controlled anger. He said, "A closure. You were having a closure on the floor of our building's elevator. Do you know what I was doing in the meantime? I was climbing 11 floors up the stairs in the dark with a flashlight because I was terrified that you were trapped. I called the concierge. I was trying to rescue you." He laughed, a joyless laugh. "And I did. I rescued you and I found you. And boy, did I find you." Every word was a dagger. The reality of my actions, stripped of all my cosmic justifications, hit me with its full force. It had not been a divine intervention. It had been a sordid and cheap betrayal. And it had happened while the man who loved me was trying to save me. David finished packing that night. He did not say much more. Every question of mine, every plea was met with a silence that was like a wall. He took his suitcase and went to a friend's house. He left me alone in the apartment that suddenly felt huge and desecrated, with the echo of his words resonating in my ears. 3 days have passed, 3 days of absolute silence from him. Lucas, the man of destiny, of course, has also disappeared. I saw him once in the garage. He did not even look at me. He fled like the rat he is. The great sign from the universe has revealed itself to be a coward. And now, in this loneliness, my chaotic and impulsive brain is struggling to process the devastation. There was a moment, right after the confrontation, when I saw the truth with horrible clarity. I saw my selfishness, my betrayal, the way I had destroyed a good man. But that truth is too heavy to bear. It is an anchor that would drag me to the bottom. So my mind, in an act of self-preservation, has started to rewrite the story again. It has started to look for excuses, to distribute the blame. Was it my fault? Yes, in part, I made a terrible, impulsive mistake, but was it only my fault? No. Is it not the universe's fault for putting me in such an impossible situation? A blackout, an elevator, an ex with whom I had unfinished business. It was a perfect storm, a test that almost no one could have passed. I was put in a cosmic trap. And David, yes, he is the victim. But is he completely innocent? His reaction, his refusal to listen, his immediate abandonment. Does that not show a lack of love, a lack of will to fight? A true love, an epic love, would have screamed, would have fought, but would have listened. He would have understood the madness of the moment. His inability to forgive, to even consider the context, shows that our love was not as strong as I thought. And Lucas, the coward, seduced me with words about destiny and mistakes, and then abandoned me to the consequences. He is also guilty. Now I'm here alone, in the midst of the ruins of my life. I lost my husband, and I lost him in the worst way possible. But as the days go by, the narrative in my head solidifies. I'm not the villain of this story. I'm the victim of a cluster of extraordinary circumstances. I was tested by fate, seduced by a ghost from the past, and finally abandoned by a husband who did not have the strength to fight for our love in the midst of the perfect storm. I made a mistake, yes, but I was pushed into that mistake. And now I'm the only one paying the price for a disaster that had many, many architects. Popular comments from Reddit. Anonymous user 1: You got stuck in an elevator with your ex and your first thought was to sleep with him while your husband climbed 11 flights of stairs to save you. And somehow you are the victim. You do not have a chaotic brain, you have a broken moral compass. Anonymous user 2: The divine sign is the most incredibly narcissistic excuse I have ever heard. The universe did not force you to do anything. You made a selfish decision and you got caught. End of story. Your husband did not abandon you, he escaped from a person who is clearly not trustworthy. Protagonist's response. It is easy to judge from the outside. You were not in that darkness with the history and the tension filling the air. It was a 1 in a million situation. Normal people do not face those tests. I did and I failed. But to blame only me is to ignore all the other forces that were at play. Anonymous user 3. Poor David. The guy is a saint. He climbs the stairs in a blackout for you and finds you with your ex. And yet, his first reaction is to protect your dignity by asking the neighbors to leave. And then he leaves without yelling. You did not lose him. You did not deserve a man like that from the beginning. Protagonist's response. His calm was not dignity, it was indifference. It was the reaction of a man who had already disconnected. A man who truly loves would have felt a passion, an anger. His silence was not a sign of strength. It was proof that he no longer cared enough to fight. It is easier to leave than to fight. Update 1. A week has passed. A week since the night of the blackout. A week since I saw David walk out the door. I have been living in a loop of panic, guilt, and a growing fury. David's silence is a form of torture I would not wish on anyone. I read the comments. People call me a narcissist. They say my moral compass is broken. They do not understand the pressure, the surreal nature of that moment in the elevator. It was like being in a dream. And now I'm awake in the middle of the nightmare. I have not heard anything from David. His phone is still off, but I could not just sit around waiting. I had to do something. My first impulse, the most stupid one, was to confront Lucas. I waited for him in the building's garage 2 days ago. When he saw me, he tried to run, but I blocked his way with my car. I yelled at him. I told him he was a coward who had seduced me with stories of destiny and then had abandoned me to the wolves. He did not even look me in the eye, he just said, "We both made a mistake. Let it go." And he scurried away. The great love of my life, reduced to a pathetic cliché. Knowing I would get nothing from him, my desperation refocused on David. If I could not talk to him, maybe I could talk to someone close to him. His sister Laura had always liked me. We had always had a good relationship. I called her. It was the most awkward conversation of my life. I told her my version of the story, the one about the divine sign, the one about the cosmic trap. I hoped for compassion, for her to intercede for me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Laura said in a voice that had lost all its warmth. David told me everything and, honestly, I do not know what you want me to say. What you did is unforgivable. My brother adored you. He climbed those stairs thinking you were in danger, and you were with another man. There is no universe or destiny that justifies that. She told me that David was devastated, that he was not eating, that he was barely talking, that he felt humiliated not only by the infidelity, but because it had happened in our own building in front of our neighbors. And then she gave me the final blow. He told me that what hurts him the most is not the act itself. It is that if the light had not come back on, you would have lied to him. You would have gotten out of that elevator, you would have hugged him, and you would have lied to his face, and he would have believed every word. I hung up, trembling. I knew in that moment that I had lost. I had lost not only David, but also any chance of redemption in the eyes of his family. My narrative of destiny had crashed against the wall of the simple, ugly truth that they saw. Now I'm sitting in this apartment that feels like the scene of a crime. Every corner reminds me of him and, for the first time, the anger has started to subside, leaving room for a chilling fear. The chaos that I myself created has swallowed me whole. I no longer know who to blame. The universe, Lucas, David, they all seem like excuses now. And I'm being left alone, face to face with the only person I cannot run from myself, and I do not like what I see. Final update. 2 months have passed since the blackout. 2 months of a solitude so deep that it has become part of my inner landscape. Lucas moved out. He left a note in the building's mailbox addressed to the management, terminating his lease agreement. He fled, as he always knew how to do. David never came back. I have not heard anything from him directly since that night. The apartment was sold. I had to move. I now live in a smaller, anonymous place, a place without memories. It has been a process of dismantling, not just of a home, but of a life. And in the void, I have had a lot of time to think. The anger is gone. The justifications about destiny and cosmic signs now sound hollow and pathetic to me. The echoes of a scared child who refuses to take responsibility. I have been forced to sit with the naked truth of my actions, and it has been a brutal process. The end of all this came yesterday, not with a call or a meeting. It came in an envelope. In my new mailbox there was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably David's. I sat on the floor of my half-empty apartment and opened it with trembling hands. It was not a letter of hate. It was not a letter of anger. It was in some way much worse. It was a farewell letter. He wrote that he had needed this time to process everything away from me. He wrote that he forgave me, but that forgiveness did not mean reconciliation. I forgive you for the infidelity, he wrote. People make terrible mistakes when they are confused. But what I cannot forget, what has changed me forever, is the reason you gave me. The divine sign. I realize that you do not live in the same world as I do, a world of decisions and consequences. You live in a world of impulses and cosmic justifications. And I realize that your love for me, even if it was real in its own way, would always come second, behind your need for drama, for the emotion of the moment. He continued. And this was the part that destroyed me. I love you, or at least I love the woman I thought you were. The woman who needed my calm, but I have realized that you do not need my calm. You need the chaos. It is where you feel most alive. And I can no longer be the anchor for your storm, because your storm was drowning me. He ended the letter by saying that he was moving to another city to start over. He wished me peace and signed simply with his name. I closed the letter, and for the first time, there was no one to blame. Not the universe, not Lucas, not even him. The truth was there, written in his clear and devastating handwriting. He did not leave me because I was unfaithful. He left me for who I'm, for my impulsive nature, for my need to find magical meanings to justify my worst decisions. My affair in the elevator was not the cause of the breakup. It was the definitive symptom of a disease that I myself cultivated. I'm alone now, not because of a bad turn of fate, but because of the decisions I made. David was not the man who could not handle my storm. He was the man who realized with a painful clarity that I never really wanted the storm to stop, and he left in search of a place where he could see the sun again. And I'm left here, in the eye of my own hurricane, finally realizing that I'm the one who creates it, and I have no idea how to make it stop.